welcome to PWE Music. I'm Dr. Patrick Engler, and today we're going to be doing another Beginner Clarinet Academy. And this one's geared maybe a little bit more towards the parents, but if you're a beginner, this might help you out too. But today we're talking about what happens when it just won't work. So there are a number of little issues that can happen that'll make it really difficult or perhaps impossible to play and get a sound out. And so we're going to dive into what some of those common causes are and how to fix them if you can. If you can't, when to take it to the repair tech. So let's zoom in and take a look at some of these issues. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the reed. And more often than not, if your reed looks like this, nice and chipped all on the top, that means you're going to need a new reed. So if the sound won't come out or it's really squeaky and the reed looks like that, that's the main culprit. And that's what we want to change out first. So what we want is the reed to be nice and clean at the top. No chips, no dents, nothing crazy. So now, maybe the reed is all good. What we want to check from there is you want to make sure that the reed is nice and aligned and it's not too far over to one side. Alternatively, we want to make sure it's not too high. If it's too high, it'll be too difficult to play. And so we'd look at the back, and you don't want to see something like that. Like I've said before in other videos, you want the tip to be nice. You want the tip to be even with the tip of the mouthpiece, and we can adjust it a little bit from there. Alternatively, you don't want to be too low and not close enough to the tip. So now reeds are made of wood, and so when you're making them moist and then drying out, those wood fibers are going to change and shift around. So here's a little bit of reed mojo. If you've exhausted all options of the tip of the reed being good and the reed being aligned, we'll place the tip of the reed on the flat part of the mouthpiece. We'll squish it down with your thumb for a little bit, and then we'll put the reed back on. Once again, making sure it's properly aligned, and we are all good to go. The next thing we'll touch on briefly is if the clarinet is assembled correctly. And the joints of the clarinet are pretty easy to put together. We just have to make sure that they're together fully, which it'll be pretty apparent if they're not. But the one thing we do want to watch out for is the bridge key, right back here. This is the one connection point that we do want to worry about. And you want to make sure that the part connected to the lower joint is underneath the part connected to the upper joint. You can see here. We'll put them together. We'll press the rings on the upper joint to lift that bridge key up and slide it over. We make sure it's properly aligned. There'll be little marks in there that show you how it's properly aligned and that the upper joint is above the lower joint. And we can test by pressing the rings on the lower joint to make sure the ring on the upper joint moves along with it. And if you want to get a little more advanced, we'll press down the rings on the lower joint completely and tap on this pad that moves along with the ring just to make sure that that's sealing. If it's not sealing, then it means your clarinet's probably going to need a little bit of adjustment, which is something you're going to want to take it to a professional for. Moving on from the bridge key, here's some other common troublemakers that will become misaligned or misadjusted that you want to keep an eye out for. So first is the A key, and this tiny screw here, which adjusts how far the A key has to travel to raise the A flat key as well. We want that to be screwed in so that there's as little play in the A key as possible without raising this pad. And the problem will be if this screw is screwed in too much, this pad will stay open when it should go all the way down and stay closed. Another common problem, and this may be by not putting the instrument in the case properly or the case not fitting quite right, are these side keys. These, especially these bottom two, the lowest one, the E flat key, can get bent and held open underneath the second one for F sharp, and that'll cause this key to stay open. Or the E flat key, alternatively, could be bent and stay on top of the F sharp, which will keep the F sharp key open. So if you're having trouble with not getting any notes out, This is a good place to start usually, because these keys are fairly easy to bend, and especially if you're playing on a cheaper instrument with lower quality keys, they're very easy to bend just by putting the instrument in the case the wrong way. Beyond that, anywhere that you have a spring, and the springs are these little needle springs. They may be very difficult to see, but perhaps the easiest example is down here. And these are what help keep the keys open and to open them when you lift up on a specific key. And sometimes just by jostling the instrument a little too much, you'll cause those springs to unhook. And usually you can put them back in fairly easily. If they become unhooked, you'll be able to see them sticking out. But using a very tiny hook, you can usually hook them back around. There's a special key spring hook that you can purchase for a few bucks, or your band director or local shop should be able to do it no problem if you just take it in. The final thing you can check are the pads. And the first step is to make sure that they're there and one hasn't fallen out. And you should be able to tell that. And on beginner instruments, they're usually just all going to be skin pads, like these white ones down here. So my instrument has cork pads on the top. Those will be orange colored. But wherever you see these circles, that's generally where you're going to have a pad. If you don't see one, that means you need to take it in and get a new replacement. If all the pads are there and if they're still having trouble, you may want to check the condition of the pads. So if they're ripped or really fuzzy and kind of puffy looking, that probably means that pad needs to be replaced. You want them to be nice and clean and fairly smooth looking so that they're going to seal that tone hole as best as possible. That about covers the issues that can be the cause of it won't play. As always, if this video helps you out, be sure to like and subscribe. Check out the Patreon if you're so inclined, and we'll catch you in the next one.